For a split second, he considered filing a report about it, but realized there was no way he could. What would it say? Fell asleep at my post at 3:02 a.m. Woke up to find a doll on my desk. Fell back asleep, woke up, and it was gone. That was a quick way to get fired. If Amber was still around, he would have a story to tell about something interesting that happened at work for once. These were some of the saddest moments of Stanley's already sad days, when he'd think, wait till I tell Amber. And then remember that there was no Amber to tell. Stanley held his nose as he passed the bio-waste bin outside the facility. He emerged from the stairs to a day that was bright and sunny. After staying in a dark hole for 8 hours, it always took his eyes a few minutes to adjust to the intensity of daylight. He squinted and blinked, like a mole that had just popped up from its underground tunnel. Stanley crossed the street to the city diner, sat down in his usual red vinyl booth, and turned his upside-down coffee cup into the upright position. Almost as if by magic, Katie the server was there to fill it. Stanley knew a little bit about Katie, from making small talk with her. She was around his age, and was taking some classes at the community college now that her son had started preschool. "You want the usual this morning, Stan?" she asked. Her smile was friendly, and her eyes were very blue. She was prettier than Stanley remembered her being. Maybe he was just lonely. Since the breakup, he would often go for whole days in which Katie was the only other human he talked to. "Actually, I might take a look at the menu today, Katie." If he was going to make a healthier choice, he might as well start now. Though it was hard to do with the irresistible smell of bacon wafting through the diner. Watching what other people were eating didn't help him either. The guy at the booth across from him was eating a tall golden butter and maple syrup drenched stack of pancakes. They looked delicious. Katie handed him the laminated folder. "Changing it up this morning, are we?" "I thought I might." He scanned the menu, looking for healthier options. None of them sounded as tasty as his usual order, but if he was going to get less squishy, he was going to have to make some sacrifices. "I think I'll take the mushroom egg white omelette with a turkey sausage and wholemeal toast." Katie smiled as she wrote down his order. "I'm impressed. Going on a diet, are we?" He smiled and patted his belly. "I'm thinking about it." After Katie left to put in his order, Stanley let his gaze wander around the restaurant. In the last booth, in the corner, an old man sat nursing a cup of coffee and reading the newspaper. He was at the city diner every morning, always alone, lingering over coffee long after his breakfast plate has been cleared. Stanley could feel the old man's loneliness, just surely as he could feel his own. He wondered, now that Amber had dumped him, if his fate was the same as the old man's. Would he grow old and be lonely, that he sat for hours in public places just to have the illusion of some company? Wasn't that what Stanley himself was doing right now? "Here you go," Katie said, delivering his breakfast with a smile. The egg white omelette was surprisingly decent, but when Stanley tried to eat his whole wheat toast, he had difficulty swallowing it. His throat had gotten sore suddenly, and felt as if it must be swollen, partially shut. It was odd, he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a sore throat. He pushed his breakfast plate away. "Does the healthy stuff not taste as good?" Katie asked, clearing his dishes. "You're usually a member of the Clean Plate Club." "No, it was good," Stanley said, his voice coming out croaky. "My throat's just really sore. Makes it hard to eat." "Well, there are all kinds of bugs going around. Lots of kids and teachers are out sick in my little boy's preschool. I hope you're not coming down with something," Katie said. "Me too," Stanley said. But it was entirely possible that he was. Who knew how many germs were swirling around that damp, dark underground facility that no fresh air or sunlight ever reached? On the way home, he stopped at the drugstore and bought some sore throat lozenges. I don't know what that word is. He popped one as soon as he paid for them. Swallowing was becoming more and more painful and more difficult. When Amber had come over on a daily basis, Stanley had kept his apartment reasonably clean. Now, when he walked into it, it felt like a doubly nasty surprise. There was the mess, but there was also the meaning behind the mess. It was a reminder that Amber was gone. The coffee table was cluttered with half-empty soda cans, hamburger wrappers, fried chicken boxes, and Chinese takeout containers. Dirty laundry was scattered in random piles on the floor. Part of him wanted to clean it up, but the rest of him said, "What does it even matter? She's not coming back, and there's nobody here but me to see the mess." Stanley unwrapped a throat tablet and popped it in his mouth. He was definitely getting sick. Great. That was just what he needed. One more thing to make his life a little more miserable. His mum had always been a big believer in steam when he or his sister was coming down with a cold, so he decided to take a hot shower. If congestion was what was causing his sore throat, breathing in some steam might help. Taking off his security uniform shirt, he had a hard time pulling his left arm out the sleeve. Once he finally got his shirt off, he could see the problem. His left arm was swollen to nearly twice the size of his right one. The arm felt weird too, numb, like when a foot falls asleep. He shook his arm around, trying to wake it up, but it lacked sensation. What kind of bizarre illness gave you a sore throat and a numb, swollen arm? He was no doctor, but he knew that these two symptoms did not go together. Stanley turned up the shower temperature as hot as he could stand it. When he held his left arm under the nozzle spray, he could feel neither the heat nor the jets of water hitting his skin. After he got out the shower, he put on a t-shirt and sweatpants, took 2 ibuprofen, popped another pill, and crawled into bed. Whatever this illness was, maybe rest would fix it. He slept for 8 hours, a dark, dreamless sleep. When he woke up, his throat felt like someone had cut it. He clutched his neck and drew his hand away and looked at it, almost expecting to see blood. He sat up slowly, his head fuzzy, achy and disoriented. His left arm was still numb and felt heavy and weak, an object that he was forced to drag around, but was of no use to him. He popped another throat pill, even though the first one hadn't begun to touch his level of pain. In the bathroom, he looked at himself in the mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he hadn't slept for days, even though he should have been well rested. A sore throat. What did Mum used to give him for a sore throat when he was a kid? He flashed back to the days when he would stay home sick from school, and his mum would take care of him. Hot tea with lemon and honey. That was what she always had made for him. He was pretty sure he had some tea bag somewhere. He went to the kitchen and rummaged through the cabinets until he found a box of tea bags that had been there since who knows when. Tea doesn't expire, does it? He thought. He microwaved a cup of water and submerged the tea bag in it. He found a little plastic packet of honey in the drawer that was full of restaurant takeout packets of mustard, ketchup and soy sauce. He stirred the honey into the tea. He remembered his mum saying that honey was soothing because it coated your throat. He didn't remember what the lemon was for, but he would have to do without it. He turned on the TV to check sports scores and sipped his hot drink. It helped a little bit. When he finished, he went back to the kitchen and opened a can of chicken noodle soup. Chicken soup was supposed to be good for sick people, right? He heated the soup on the stove, then took a bowl of it into the living room to eat in front of the TV. He quickly discovered that all he could manage was sipping the broth. The chicken chunks and noodles hurt too much going down. It felt like he was swallowing rocks. Stanley took more ibuprofen and sucked on another throat pill and hoped that he would feel better as the evening wore on. But the feeling of pain in his throat didn't go away any more than the feeling of anything in his left arm came back. He toyed with the idea of calling in sick, but he knew he couldn't miss out on 8 hours of pay. Money was too tight. He barely had enough for rent and groceries as it was. When he put on his uniform, the left sleeve of his shirt was so tight he could barely bend his elbow. It was not an easy walk to work, with his painful throat and his lifeless left arm, but eventually he made it to the storage yard and down the hidden stairs. As usual, he held his breath, passing the stinking bio-waste bin that scanned his ID badge at the door. In the facility, he let his eyes adjust to the dim greenish light for a moment before heading to the security office. He checked the monitors and saw nothing out of the ordinary. Good. He was tired and in pain and ready for a nap. He leaned back in his chair and let the welcome oblivion of sleep overtake him. He awoke with a gasp, feeling like he was being watched. He looked around and checked the monitors. Nothing. But the doll was on his desk again. He picked it up and smiled at it. "You again?" he said. His voice was getting hoarser. "Where did you come from? Is somebody playing a game with me?" Maybe he had a secret admirer, he thought, but he immediately dismissed the idea as ridiculous. What kind of weirdo secret admirer would leave him a ballerina doll? Not the kind of secret admirer he'd want, that's for sure. He tilted the doll over to activate her voice. "We like you," she chirped in her happy little girl tone. "I like you too, little dolly," Stanley said. "I'm not sure why I do, but I do." Maybe having the talking doll there with him at work was like people who kept the TV on in the background all the time in their homes. A little bit of a noise was a reminder that even if it didn't feel that way, you weren't all alone in the world. Sad but understandable. The world was a lonely place. He turned over the doll again. "Take me home with you," she said. "Well, I was gonna take you home with me yesterday, but then I woke up, and you were gone. I guess you missed your chance, huh? Who do you belong to, anyway?" He tilted her. "Take me home with you." He examined the doll. "Maybe you belong to the kid of somebody else who works here. I don't want to take away some kid's toy. You'd better be off with a little girl than with me. Tilt." "Take me home with you," the doll said again. Too bad real women weren't this insistent on having his company. Some little girl could be real upset if her dolly's gone, and I'm a big grown man. I don't have any use for dollies. So why was he talking to this doll as if it could understand what he said, and making his throat sore in the process? This virus, or whatever it was, must be making him loopy, he thought. And here he went again, tilting the thing to hear what it would say. "Take me home with you." He set the doll down on the desk. It had officially crossed the line from cute to annoying. Okay, if you stay put on this desk until my shift is over, I'll take you home with me. But now it's nap time. Nighty-night." He leaned back in his chair and dozed off again. Stanley was running late for work. He was trying to get ready, but his big fat fingers were too clumsy to button the shirt of his uniform or tie or his shoes. He needed help, but he was utterly alone. Finally, knowing he would be terribly late if he didn't leave right away, he ran onto the street in his half-buttoned shirt and untied shoes. But when he looked around, all of the familiar landmarks of his neighborhood were gone. Where was Greenblatt's Deli? Where was the Dutch Girl Dry Cleaners? He looked up at a street sign and saw that the street names had changed. The sign that had once said Forest Avenue now said Fazbear Avenue. It made no sense, but he was lost. How could that be when he was just 10 steps from the door of his apartment building? Finally, he hailed a cab and told the driver the address of the storage yard that hid his place of employment. None of the streets or buildings looked familiar as he rode through the city, but the driver seemed to know where he was going. Stanley told himself to breathe and relax. It was okay. Things were under control now. The cab stopped on a dark side of the street that Stanley didn't recognize. Maybe the cab driver didn't know where he was going after all. "Hey buddy," Stanley said. "I don't think you've got the right address." When the cab driver turned around, his face wasn't human. It was a bizarre, robotic version of an animal's face, pink and white with a long snout, large ears and glowing yellow eyes. The face, apparently hinged, split open, revealing the full orbs of the creature's eyes, and a mouthful of knife-like teeth. It opened its jaw wider and lunged towards Stanley in the back seat, shattering the panel of glass that separated them. Had he screamed? Stanley wondered as he tried to shake off the nightmare. Probably his sore throat had rendered him so hoarse that he couldn't have screamed if he tried. But even if he had, who would have heard him, squirreled away in this tiny dark office? He could die in here, and nobody would notice. Nobody guards the security guard. What was that thing in his dream anyway? When he finally woke up all the way, and he could reorient himself to the familiar surroundings, he noticed that the doll was gone again. It was weird. He kind of wanted to tell somebody about it, but who could he tell? At the city diner, Katie filled up his coffee cup. "You look like you could use this," she said. Stanley winced as he tried to swallow a sip of the scalding liquid. Coffee was probably a bad idea. "You want your usual, or do you want your healthy routine again?" "Oatmeal," Stanley said, his voice a scratchy croak. "Just a bowl of oatmeal." Katie knitted her brow. "Are you okay, Stan? You don't sound so good." It was nice that she cared enough to ask. "Sore throat's worse." He rubbed his neck. "Don't think I can eat solid food." "Okay, oatmeal it is. But have you seen a doctor? You know, the drugstore around the corner has a little walk-in clinic. When I had an ear infection last month, they gave me some medicine that fixed me right up. They're pretty inexpensive too." No doctors. People always thought doctors could fix everything, but when Stanley's dad had gone so sick he couldn't work anymore, he'd gone to the doctor and taken every medicine and done every torturous treatment he had been told to do. Within 6 months, he was dead anyway. "It's actually a nurse instead of a doctor at a clinic," Katie said. "She's really nice. She'll ask you some questions, then she'll take a look at your ears, nose and throat, and then write you a prescription. It's just some kind of bug, and it'll run its course." Stanley rasped. He had to admit he did sound terrible though. "Suit yourself," Katie said. "I'll get you on your oatmeal. And I'm also bringing you a large orange juice on the house. A little extra vitamin C can't hurt." "Thank you." Stanley was struck by how caring Katie was. He wondered if he was single. It would be nice to have someone who cared about him. Eating the oatmeal felt like swallowing hot sand. Hoping for relief, he sipped some orange juice, but it burned his throat like battery acid. On his way home, he stopped at the drugstore and bought some throat pills that were supposed to be stronger than the ones he had been using. He doubted they would be strong enough. Once he was back in his apartment, he kicked off his shoes and collapsed on the bed without even taking off his uniform. He was asleep in seconds. He awoke 7 hours later to a ringing phone. His mouth was dry as dust, and his throat stung and burned. He reached for the phone with his good arm, but quickly discovered that it was numb and swollen now too. Awkwardly, he managed to lift the phone and put it up to his ear. "Hello?" His voice was a scratchy whisper. "Stan, is that you?" It was his older sister, Melissa. "Yeah, hi sis." He hadn't seen her since his nephew's birthday party, but usually she called from time to time to check on him. "You sound awful." Stanley could hear the worry in her voice. "Are you sick?" "Come down with a cold," he said. He didn't want to say any more than the minimum number of words it took to communicate meaning. Talking hurt too much. "No wonder," Melissa said. "Working nights in that dark, airless factory. Like being in the catacombs. I'm surprised you're not sick all over the time. Hey, listen, the kids are over at Mum's and Todd is bowling tonight. I made a pot of chili and some cornbread. I thought I might bring some over and we could have dinner together." Even though he felt horrible, he was still grateful for the offer of company. At least he didn't have to face another evening alone. "Sounds nice," he rasped. "Okay, I'll be by at 6. Do you need me to pick you anything up from the drugstore?" A new throat, Stanley thought, but he said, "No thanks." With difficulty, he dragged himself out the bed and into the bathroom. He looked in the mirror to survey the damage, which was quite significant. Dark shadows had formed under his bloodshot eyes, and his skin had an unhealthy greyish cast. What worried him the most, though, was his right arm. Like his left, it was now so swollen that the sleeve of his uniform was like the casing of a fat sausage. He didn't know if he'd be able to take the shirt off without ripping it. Probably best just to leave it on for now.